All right, everybody, welcome to season 2 of Gaming Gaiden. This is Andrew, one of your hosts, and I'm joined once again by.
Mike, here we go.
All right, so this time we're going to be talking about the JLPT, that is the Japanese Language Proficiency Test. And
Mhm.
this is only tangentially related to gaming, but we'll try to weave some of that in there as well. But this podcast, we really try to talk about gaming and Japanese and the cross section thereof, but
Right.
sometimes there's a little bit less crossover than other times. But but
Well, this
anyway,
is this is a topic that I did want to discuss because
mhm,
it is of interest to me, both as a gamer and as a teacher. So, I study Japanese not because I need it, but because I want it, and because I had a wonderful time there, but also because I want to play video games in Japanese. I like it. I think it's nice, and it offers a good kind of challenge. It helps to keep me a little extra sharp on top of what video games already do to provide that additional mental acuity.
and you've played Chrono Trigger in Japanese, right?
That's right. Yeah. So the first video game I ever played through in Japanese entirely was Blue Dragon back when we lived in Saitama in 2000. I think it was 2007. I think because it
Hmm.
straddled my time from Japan and coming back to America before I finished it because it took a whole lot of time. And then Chrono Trigger, which was I think last 2022 January to February, maybe into March. It took me a
Okay.
long time. So if it's like a 20-hour game, I think it took me like 65 hours to play in Japanese. I did a lot of vocab work. And just most recently, I played through Super Mario RPG on the Super Famicom in Japanese.
Okay, cool. I can't remember the first game I played in Japanese. I keep my phone in Japanese. I try to play every game in Japanese these days, and I
Yeah, that's nice.
have for a few years now. There are times where you know, like Final Fantasy or something, where it's like the third battalion and the garrison and many Senmon Yogo. The technical terminology just pop up, and in sci-fi too. The center magnitude and the blah blah blah. Like a lot of words pop up that you don't know.
Yeah,
Uh,
the dingle
so
hoppers.
yeah, so that's when it gets a little tough for me. But other
Mhm.
than that, I've been studying pretty consistently. God, since 2005, man, it's going on 20 years now. God, it's going on so long.
Yeah.
But and I will let me tell you my JLPT history, and you can go into yours. So I took it while I lived in Japan. Uh, like let's say my probably 2008, because I gave myself my probably 2 years. I went
Mhm.
straight to JLPT one, and
Mm.
I was,
Wow.
I could kind of do it, but I wasn't anywhere near passing at the same time at that time.
Mm.
I've never taken any of the other tests, and I've taken it 3 other times, so 4 times. I have failed it 4 times. The last time I took the JLPT-1 was this past December, and I failed it by 1 point.
That's so painful, man.
So
It's so painful.
painful.
And I want to come back to that because when we talk about some of like the validity and how it's evaluated, that's important to remember.
I'd like to go over that more probably. But, you know, I gotten a lot better, I think, and I'm going to take it this year again,
Mm.
and I am taking lessons through Zoom
Hmm.
now with a Japanese native, and also my books were old. That was one thing I
Hmm.
noticed. Like I couldn't find good JLPT in one books, and they weren't on Amazon. So I found a
Hmm.
company called Bonjinsha,
Oh
which
yeah, yeah.
yeah, they're good, and I'm studying with my tutor with those. So hopefully I'll be ready. And it's a life goal of mine to pass this test, man. Everybody's like, why, are you going to use it? Yeah, dude, maybe. I just want to pass it, especially since I
Yeah.
was 1 point away. Are you kidding me? And plus The other thing is, if you pass JLPT N1 specifically, maybe N2 a little bit, but like you can apply it. Well, I have a spouse visa now because my wife's
Mhm,
Japanese native, but I think
mhm.
if you pass JLPT N1, you like can get like visa stuff or whatever much more
You
easily.
preferential?
Yeah, you get some preferential treatment, and people in America talk about this a lot where resumes don't matter anymore or whatever. Well, guess what? In Japan, they 100% matter. And if you have JLPTN1 on that resume, it's going to be huge. And like, I don't
Yeah.
need Japanese for my work now, but
Mhm.
if I add it to the resume and if I ever need, rather, have it and not
Yeah.
need it than need it and not have it, that kind of thing. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, that's kind of
No,
my opening spiel.
I think that there's definitely a lot of emphasis put on what's necessary, and that makes sense, right? Because we're all trying to survive, the existential threat that our current brand of capitalism delivers for us, right? But like, there's also the need to enjoy something and engage with it, right? We don't need to be doing gaming guiden. We don't need to be talking about translation or video games, but we both have a love of these things and we want to share it. And that's a perfectly valid reason to do something.
I think so. I always hated hearing, even when I was a kid, I hated hearing like, "Why study it? I'm never going to use it."
Hmm.
Uh, you know, I just think that's so dumb. And a lot of, yeah, I don't love pragmatism, man. I don't, I mean, of course it's necessary, but in some ways, but I think sometimes there's a little bit over. People love it too much, I guess, more than I do at least. So, yeah, I have a love-hate relationship with this test, and when I pass it when I pass it, there won't be a soul on this planet that won't know. I'm telling the whole fucking world because 'cause it's been
I'm
a long time coming.
I'm looking forward to it, man. I really
Yeah.
am. So let me fill folks in a little bit, so in case you're not all that familiar with the JLPT. So it is the Japanese language proficiency test. That's usually how it's referred to internationally, but it is domestically in Japan called the Nihongo no Ryoku Shiken, right? Which JLPT is a pretty solid translation of. And this test started way back in like '84 or so,
I did not know
and
that.
it's gone through. I think it's only gone through one major revision, and I took the test before the revision for
My
the
first
first time.
time as well, they didn't have
Oh,
the
okay.
N. Yeah, it was just
Right, right.
JLPT-1 at the time. They added the Ns, and there was no 5th level.
So it was right. It was only four levels before. It was, and they were Qs. They would call it the Q. I think internationally rather than using an N, which is probably easier for a lot of other languages to work with, even though it's a Japanese test. So the easiest test was level four, which was Yonkyu, and then Sankyu, Nikyu,
Right,
Ikkyu,
right.
right? And then they switched that up, and they because there was a huge gap basically between three and two, they changed it up to a five level test, and now three is the pretty solid intermediate. But it's kind of like the only tests that really matter are the level two and level one tests. These are really the tests where people are looking for college admissions and job applications. I think as things change with immigration, right, and the need for more workers to come in, then you might see, like, yeah, you know what, a passing N3 is good. And if things get really bad, they might say, okay, N4 passing. It's more like N5, N4, like you're getting on the boards, you're making some progression, but the actual tests of consequence for most folks are going to be the N2 and the N1, which were formerly NICU and EQ.
Going back to the, talk about, like, them changing up the test,
Mm-hmm.
from what I heard, and maybe you know about this more than I do, it was a little bit easier for Chinese people because of the kanji or something, so they had to reconfigure that part of the test, and,
Mm-hmm.
there was also, like, no there wasn't much testing on katakana, which we know katakana all day long, but because it's English
Mhm.
words most of the time, but, if a
Oh, you
Vietnamese
mean loan
person
words, yeah.
yeah, if a Vietnamese person or whoever that's not an English native takes the test, they need
Mhm.
to be tested on katakana, those English loan words as
Yeah,
well. It's
right.
just the same level of, well, not the same as kanji, but you know what I mean? It still needs to be
It's
tested.
it's just
So,
as far removed as for an American, English speaker who doesn't know kanji. It's like
yeah, pretty much,
right,
yeah.
because if you look at kanji and you understand what the ideogram represents, then you can often sort of intuit the meaning. But if you don't know them, you can't. And if you take them away entirely, in the case of katakana, which is usually used for loan words, then if you don't know the word, you don't know the word. That's it. You can't figure it out.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's something I've been curious about because Japanese, it seems kind of counterintuitive, kind of surprising that there doesn't seem to be a real language authority that tries to maintain the so-called purity of the language, like you see happen in France and Spain, where they sort of every so often try to say like, you know what, we need to take this English loan word out and replace it with something that is clearly understandable to a native French speaker. I'm surprised that this isn't really an effort in Japan because it
I've
seems like
heard
there's so many more loan words coming in from English, particularly, but just it's like all katakana.
I've heard that average French people will just use the English loan word,
Hmm.
and they will often sort of make fun of whatever that branch of the government, the language department,
Yeah.
will make up for it to make a French word. Like, I get it, but there is something
Hmm.
to be said about being flexible and as a language and evolving with some flexibility. But there is like sometimes it feels like English is just taking over Japanese, man. Like every other word is katakana and they forget like I've heard the
Yeah.
story of like one girl, asking for lingo juicu, and then the Japanese person was like, "Is that apuru juicu?" You know, like it's just
Yeah.
it's weird that that's happening. Uh, it's like something weird happen after World War II, or what is it? I know we have bases there. Does that mean everybody wants to learn English so bad? But this is a TikTok video I want to make actually, probably for
Mm.
Gaming Gaiden. But I wonder what the percentage of English is English. Like it's like mostly Hebrew and Latin and French, which is Latin.
Mhm.
Like we have so many words from those languages.
Mhm.
So Japanese is kind of doing this now. We did this hundreds of years ago in English
Yeah.
because we had much more
Yeah. I mean,
proximity.
I think the largest percentage of our words actually come from French. They're a
Prob Probably so
so.
like sometimes when people are learning Japanese, they'll be like, "Why is so much English in here? Why don't they just speak more Japanese?" And it's just
Mhm.
like, well, just look at this. Took me a while to realize too. Just look at our own language.
Yeah.
We're barely speaking English most of the time. Last time English was pure, quote unquote,
Right.
was 1,000 years ago when it was Old English and nothing but Germanic. It was just unrecognizable.
Right. And this is the thing, right? Like this is while that I feel like prescriptivism. So for those who aren't familiar with this, right, in terms of language grammar, there's prescriptive grammar and descriptive grammar. Prescriptive grammar is the type of grammarian who will say like this is the correct form. This is the correct form you must use in order to follow the conventions of the written language. That's usually referring to your academic scenarios, right? And there's descriptive grammar, which tends to describe language. Let's look at the language as people are using it, regardless of what our textbooks and traditionalists have said. And so there's always going to be this kind of balance. And the thing is, if you want to ensure intelligibility for a language down the line, you need those prescriptivists trying to
Uh-huh.
sort of hold fast to the structures. It's never going to work. It's absolutely never going to work. And that's why it's even more important sometimes to keep that prescriptivism going because it is a failing endeavor. It always will be. It'll never actually be the case. But that's why you got to do it to try and slow the change of language to the point where like people can keep up with it.
It's funny whenever you talk with Japanese people of like around our age or younger.
Mhm.
There's quite a lot of katakana.
Yep.
The older you get, there's like a few words where you say the katakana word that everybody else is understanding. And the old people don't even know what you're talking about.
Mhm.
And like there's some like do you know abeku?
No. Is that a
Abe,
store?
no, abeku comes from avec, which in French
French?
it's just with. I mean, it's an older word for couple.
Oh,
This is
wow.
an almost antiquated word for couple because I think nowadays they will just say "kappuru." But I've heard, when I'm with my wife in
Mhm.
Japan, some, Oba-san called us "abeku," and I was like,
Ah, yeah.
what is that?" So, yeah, like, even some
The
katakana gets changed in and
the
out and stuff.
the old preferred loan word.
Yeah, there's a few of those, man. But anyway, let's get back to the test. Sorry, I digress
Right,
slightly.
right. No, no, no. These are all, important things because it's it's important to think about these things when you're thinking about a language test, right? So the JLPT is meant to test your Japanese language skills, but it's going to be designed by a group of likely prescriptivist grammarians who are sort of conservative academics. So this kind of language test usually is very skewed towards academic language, traditional language. There might be another word instead of avec or kapuru that is preferred, right? And that's what's going to show up on the test. And you might think like, well, I've lived in Japan for 3 years and I've never encountered this word, right? And that's
Yeah.
kind of one of the weird things that happens with the validity of exams is you've got to recognize, and people always need to recognize this regardless of the test, not just the JLPT. I'm talking SATs, TOEFL, whatever it may be, exam entrance exams, or even your classroom exam. They're
Mhm.
written by human beings and they're going to have biases. They're going to reflect what those people think is important. And so when you approach a test like the JLPT, you can't just assume that this test is perfect. No test is, right? So it's going to have its strengths and weaknesses. And that's something that I think a lot of people don't really think about because they look at the scores that they get and they might feel that they're failures because they've failed the test. But in a lot of cases, I would say the tests have also failed the test takers. I think that the JLPT, and this is, you know, I am not an expert on the Japanese language. I took the JLPT multiple times. I've only passed JLPT 3. So
Okay.
I'm still working towards level 2, but I haven't been able to take it because the pandemic meant that we couldn't take it in my region and it still hasn't come back.
Oh, not at all. Okay.
Yeah, no.
LA, I think, used to have it twice, but it's only once now. Uh,
No, I'm pretty sure
December.
America has only had it once, and that Canada has offered both time slots, the July
Okay.
and the thing. But I don't know. Things have changed through the years, so I'm not sure. But traditionally, as far as I knew, in New York, I was only ever able to take it in December.
Yeah, it's generally in December.
And
God,
that's
I
the
wanna
case
pass
right
that.
now as well. So this test, right, which is hugely consequential for a lot of people, right? They need that level 2 test to be accepted into a college. They need that level 1 for particular, maybe a high level translation. Even Jeremy Blaustein was like, "Oh, I never passed the level 1. I just passed level 2, got to work." And then it's like, okay, well, my work now speaks for itself, right?
Dude, I swear to you, man, this is another situation going back, well, we were talking about this off air, I guess, but
Mhm.
it feels like back in the day, you could probably pass in 2 and just start doing it, but, like, I swear, dude, like, I show people, like, the N1, like, me getting close to N1
Mhm.
and all that. It feels like no one gives a shit until you pass N1 anymore these days.
Oh yeah.
I've been at a convention actually for translating comics or something. It was a
Mhm.
comic convention, and I asked the people that were translators, like, "Can you at least get some sort of apprenticeship or anything under if you have N2?" And they said, "No, it needs to be N1." Like,
This is yeah.
because
So
I think there's
this is
more
what
people than
happens
ever in this
as
field too now. Yeah.
right. This is now more of a competitive field because there's more people in it. So now we're just gonna this is the thing about standardized testing, right? It's always like, let's just weed out more than half of the applicants by just making this cutoff point. And in some ways, the cutoff point can be arbitrary, and in a lot of ways, they might be losing a lot of great talent because they're only looking at a standardized exam. Now, this
Right.
this is the weird thing too about this test is it's not entirely a standardized test, because if it were that, then you would just get your results like that, right? Your answer is correct or your answer is wrong. It's all multiple choice, right? So why aren't you getting your answers right away? And that's because the JLPT does go through human scoring as well.
I did
And they
not
have
know
to,
this.
yeah.
Wow.
And so this is the thing. In order to make sure that these tests are sort of, that the old test is still valid against the new test, right? There's also this idea that we have to make sure that people are scoring in a way that makes sense. We're trying to prevent the possibility, because it's multiple choice, that someone has gotten lucky and happened across more than, in the old test it was like you needed a 60% basically to pass, right? Oh, they got pushed over the mark by luck, and then you get into a situation where you need the language and you don't quite have it.
Mhm.
So there's someone going through these tests looking for patterns in your answer choices of what's correct, what's wrong, and then ultimately, this is why I think it's really crazy that in your case you failed by one. Someone had to look at your test and decide that however successful you were in one area and however much you had trouble in another area, they decided that you had to be put one below, basically, because it's not a simple matter of I got X number correct, I got X number wrong.
I did not
It's
know that.
someone has to go through it and be like, all right, is this real? Are these results accurate? Is this going to work? And so someone had to look at it and say, this is going to be a failing score. And that's where it really hurts. Is, I mean, it's always going to be that case, the ones that are right on the line. And you know, in an educational environment, when a test is very consequential, particularly in the situation of a test that is only offered once a year to people, I would generally take the approach of err on the side of promotion, which is a phrase that I picked up from an old supervisor of mine. When I had those borderline students where I was like, I think this student can do all right, but like the numbers are slightly under. It's like, well, are there things you can find in other areas of their academic expertise that would make up for that 1 to 2 point deficit? And I'd be like, well, absolutely. And he'd be like, then give them that 1 to 2 point deficit.
Well, that's
Because
good.
because in terms of progression through life in schooling, high school and everything, you don't want to be costing people years of their life because they missed
Yeah.
1 point, when you know that there's more to this person than that test. And that is the problem with these kinds of tests, right? Is you often just get reduced to the number. And that company that's looking at applicants and they say, oh my god, we've got 2,000 applicants, we can't get through 2,000 applicants, what do we do? Boom, cut the N2 out, it's only N1 or better. Okay, now we're down to 200 applicants, can we look at that? Yes. Okay, that's where we're going to go. And it, yeah, it means they might have lost out on someone like Jeremy Blaustein.
What's generally your best, subject in the JLPT?
Listening, which is funny
Really?
because I would regard myself as a very poor listener. I'm terrible. I'm terrible at listening in English, and
I wouldn't say that. I don't think you have any problem.
well, here's the thing, right? So, to those folks at home listening or watching, Andrew and I were talking a little before the show. I didn't really start speaking very much until I was in about fourth grade. And the reason for a lot of that is, other than, my social development and language development, was it had a lot to do with me not really feeling confident in what I was hearing and interpreting. And the reason that I came to be more comfortable and confident in listening and speaking was that I was a really strong reader. And I spent years and years and years of reading all sorts of stuff for myself personally for pleasure before school started forcing me to read all the time. And that's what really informed my listening. So the vast majority of what I do when I'm listening is sort of already starting to predict what someone's going to say based on context and past things I've read and experienced.
Okay.
So the weakness for me in Japanese is like I don't have enough breadth of knowledge with reading and just different scenarios in the language to really know for sure what someone's going to be talking about. Luckily, with the JLPT in this kind of test environment, they're usually kind of limited in the kinds of scenarios that they present, and that helps. But yeah,
Okay.
it's I am a weak listener. I watch everything with subtitles, and I always have. I grew up with my grandparents too, and they always wanted the captions on because they couldn't hear. But I liked it because I could always follow because I was always reading instead of just listening.
Mine my that's my weak point is the listening,
Mm.
and also the long reading. Like if it's a page long,
Hmm.
I think I didn't dude, I didn't grow up reading a whole lot, but was weird
Hmm.
because I was good at grammar and spelling, which transfers over into my good points in Japanese, which is the
Hmm.
grammar and the kanji. Like I have those no problem pretty much for the test at least. And
Hmm.
uh but listening, it's just I find it so difficult at times, I still do. And the reading, man, I think I read one book for pleasure growing up, you know?
Hmm.
I just it's undiagnosed ADD, and if it is, I don't have much
Hmm.
ADD outside of, reading, I guess, but I
Hmm.
just there have been times where I've read the passage in Japanese, and I felt like I got it pretty much as I would get it in English, but I still get the questions wrong just because
Hmm.
my regular reading comprehension just in general isn't great for my age.
Right. So this is something when you told me earlier in the year about the score, I was like, to me, there are two terms, right? There's the false positive and a false negative. False negative is when someone um, fails the test and they shouldn't have, and a false positive is when they pass when they shouldn't have. And to me, that sounded very much like what I would usually classify as a false negative. And when I see a false negative like that, I tend to think there's an issue not with the language skills, but with the test taking skills. And
Yeah.
this gets back to what I was saying earlier that right, these are tests are not infallible. They represent biases, and there are also very just idiosyncratic aspects to their design that
Well, they talk
someone needs
about,
to be
like, what
familiar with how they work.
in the long passage parts, the
Mhm.
test taking strategy is to just read a sentence before the question or whatever. And then when I
Mhm.
do that, I still don't know what in the heck they're talking about. Like to
Yeah.
me, I really feel like I need to read the whole thing for me to get it.
Mhm.
All this
Yeah.
like, "Oh, just read the question. Just read the question and read a sentence before where it's asking." Like, okay, I feel like I just cannot do that.
Yeah. So one of the things, right, is I've seen people complain about this and be like, "Oh, it's not that hard if you know it," and that's true. If the language test is easy for you, it's because you are so far above the level that it is testing. It's basically how
Yeah,
it
yeah, 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 yeah.
right. If I sat for the TOEFL, I'd probably get a very high score and think like it's not that bad because I have a high level of English language proficiency, right? And that's
Well,
what
you're a
they're
native
testing
speaker.
for. But when it comes to this, so like for those not entirely familiar, right? The test breaks down. It used to be three categories of 400 points and it's 60% to pass. You had writing vocabulary was 100 points, listening was 100 points, and reading grammar was 200 points. And that's where we're finding like they were finding false positives with a lot of Chinese test takers because their reading was worth 200 points and it would just drive the score right up
Right,
because they
right,
were
right.
familiar with the characters. Let me take a quick look. I've got the thing here. So now it's vocabulary and grammar, which is under the language knowledge category. That's 60 points. Reading is 60 points, and listening is 60 points. The passing marks change at the different levels of the test. So for N2, you're basically looking at 50%, which is a 90 out of 180. And you have to have your scores distributed in each section. So it's 19, 19, and 19. That's the minimum you could have. If you scored perfect listening and reading, you'd have 120 points. But if you got a zero in language knowledge, vocabulary, grammar, then you'd still fail the test because you need to have enough in each category.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Right.
I knew that.
So looking at the reading section, right? It sounds to me like there's there's only two real possible things that I could recommend to you speaking as a language teacher. All right. Basically, you either need to, it's like lifting weights, right? Or you're going to run a marathon. Okay, the marathon is what, 26 miles, 26 miles. Is that right? I've never run a marathon in case anyone can't tell.
28, I think. I don't know. I don't like running.
In case, okay, let's say you're going to run a 5K. Okay, practice 7K, right?
Right, right.
Going to take this reading test, you need to be reading, just read every day. Find a book you like, keep going with it. Find a breadth of materials, right, that deal with some of the subjects that might be in here. A little bit of science reading, maybe do the newspaper, right? So you read an
I
article from
do
the
need to
news,
do that. You know what's been great
science
for my
section.
listening specifically is all the
Mhm.
YouTube channels, dude.
Yeah,
So many great Japanese YouTubers now.
yeah.
We did talk about, me and my wife, we talked about, getting NHK somehow over here. Remember
Hmm.
Slingbox? That's dead now, but we looked into it. Like we were trying to sling NHK from my parents-in-law house or
Yeah,
apartment in Japan. And it's like we couldn't get that to work, but it's just like, why would we even need that? Like Japanese YouTube is like the thing now, and it's so good. And
that's true.
I get so much listening, and with the subtitles they always put, like Japanese TV does,
Yeah,
it's so perfect. Like I feel angry and jealous at learners now because we were in Japan
there's so many good resources.
just before this started to really take off because like I was in Japan, God, 2006. YouTube came out in
Hmm.
2005. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
we were in hog heaven with that Denshi Jisho, that electronic dictionary for the DS.
Sonomama Rakubiki Jiten on the DS. That's
Yeah,
how I played through Blue Dragon.
that was our
Yeah,
thing back in the day, man. And now it's like, a little bit different, but yeah, it's funny
yeah.
to think about that stuff.
And then that dictionary also would ding me for stroke order errors. I'd be like,
That's
"Oh, I
good.
can't find the kanji because I don't know the stroke order."
And also the direction of the stroke too. You know that? It'll know the
Yeah.
direction as well.
Yeah. So the first thing, right, I recommend would be just like it's just powerlifting constantly in terms of reading if that's your weakness. And like that's my suggestion to everybody, right? It's the same thing Werner Herzog said, right? Read, 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 read more. That's it. But the other thing is, I would say, like, if you're finding that the strategy of reading the sentence where the question refers to, like, of course, that's a test taking strategy. But like, in order to quickly ascertain where the question is referring to, your reading skill needs to be that strong already, which means you'd already be past that level. If you're at the level, what you need to do to sort of streamline things, because the amount of time that you get in the reading section for N2 and N1, I don't think is really reasonable for a student of the language to fully read all of the material and all of the questions and answer comfortably. There's going to have to be time management.
Yeah.
So what I would say is don't worry about, under normal circumstances where people have time, I would say read the question, read the answers, then read the article. And as you go through the article, it should trigger a lot of those
So you're
points.
big on reading the answers first, question and answer first.
It depends on the design of the test. In the case of the JLPT, though, I think most N2 and N1 test takers are not going to be fast enough to read everything. so, so what I would say is like you can just read the questions and then go ahead and read the article because it sounds to me like you favor the article as the thing. Like you want to read that whole document
I
in order
don't,
to be
not
able to
because I
understand
love
it.
articles, it's just because I literally won't get it. It's in another
Yeah,
language,
that's
s
fine. Then
and
that's a
it's
good thing to know.
yeah, like,
It's a good thing to know about yourself.
I cannot, like, fill in the gaps. I need to read the whole thing for the most part, and probably is a testament to me not reading as a kid. I remember picking
Mhm,
up comic books. I didn't read a lot of comics until I was an adult, man. Like, I couldn't even
mhm,
make my way through a comic book when I was a kid. I was bored out of my mind after, like, 1 page, generally
mm,
speaking, you know?
yeah,
I really have pretty bad ADD with reading, I think.
mhm, yeah. I mean, then what I'd say is go through and read the questions before you read the passage. So read the
Yeah.
questions. As you read the questions, maybe this is just like little mindful things a student can do. If you take a pencil, you should always have a number two pencil, right? Just like
Well, yeah.
circle the key word in the question or something. It doesn't have to be like some specific uh, incredibly focused thing that you ascertain is like the most important thing. But yeah, you want to look for some keyword or something just so that it's quick reference if you need to look back at the question. So like if they're asking like what was the reason that Johnny went swimming after 8 p.m. or something, you'd be like, oh, this is swimming 8 p.m. I circle it. And then when I'm reading, I can see that point come up and I know I'm going to link it back to that question. It's up to you if you want to keep reading, but when you encounter relevant information in the text, you can circle it or underline it or whatever and come back to it. It's kind of a thing you'll have to find on your own how you want to do it logistically, but that's the basics of it. Is like read those questions, find what it is that you need to know, get them in your head before you're reading so that they start to trigger as you're reading. That's really the most basic element of it. And that's,
Okay.
I was used to working in public school setting where, a student might have a time and a half where they might have unlimited time to take a test. And that's in that kind of setting, I would say like, yeah, read all of the questions and all of the answers and highlight whatever you see as the key for the question and then go back to the text. And whenever you see something relevant to it, highlight that as well and look for some of the key things to look for in the TOEFL and like New York State Regents exams. This is for high schoolers and in English high school, but still, it's still something that's commonly used in this kind of writing. Conjunctions, right? Contrast. Those are usually key points. Anytime you see something contrasting two things, it's like you're looking at like a 90% chance that's showing up in a question if there's a difference pointed out or even a similarity. So,
Okay.
yeah. Now, in terms of listening, I do have a complaint about the listening section of this test. I feel like they try to they try to get people tripped up. I feel like it's not a good thing to do. And I feel like it doesn't necessarily reflect natural language in most cases. It's not just the JLPT that does this. Some of the English tests do this too, right? Well, they'll say like, listen to this conversation between two people. What time will they meet at the playground? And it'll be like, hi, Joe. I was going to meet you at the playground today at 3 o'clock. But then my brother, he got sick. So I'm going to have to show up at 5 o'clock. Okay? Oh yeah, okay, that's fine. I'll meet you there at 5 o'clock. No, wait a second, Joe. I just remembered. I've actually got to do this other thing, so I'm gonna have to meet you there at 5:30, or but maybe 5 o'clock if I can make it. what time do they? And it's like, well, why are you throwing out?
Yeah.
Why are you throwing all these detractors out there? That's what they're called, detractors, right? They're meant to mislead certain people, right? Because again, they're trying to weed people out, right?
They
As if that's
think that
as if that's a goal.
if you can follow that and catch all that, and when they're sidewinding and going whipping and around and all
Hmm.
that and detracting, then you really have language mastery. That's what I
Right.
gather.
That's true. But it's also like if someone has to throw out that many detractors, right? Then that person's not a good communicator. Like, and if someone
Yeah.
in a situation like that, right? Where there's been, say, like three or four different possibilities in a natural conversation, I'm going to just verify with the person. Be like, okay, so you want to meet tomorrow at 5:30, right? Okay, cool. See you then. Like, we're not going to just be like, oh, that's it. I only heard you say it once. Bye bye. I'll see
Mhm.
you tomorrow at whatever time you said. Right? It's
Yeah.
not natural. So one of my issues is usually that they set up situations that aren't really natural, and
So with
that's yeah.
I agree with that. I mean, the other part about the listening test, I remember this because I took it just a few months ago.
Mhm.
They dude, they have the CD player in, like, the corner of the room. I
That
was
should be center.
literally on the other side of the room, the far corner, the opposite corner. You know,
Mhm.
it was upper left, I was sitting bottom right kinda thing.
Mhm.
And so, I mean, I did okay, but I was really like, "They need to fix this going forward." This
Mhm.
and the audio, it could have been a little louder too. I didn't say anything, I didn't wanna cause any shit, but next
You
time
gotta.
I
You
think I
gotta.
will. I think I will.
Absolutely.
Like, I'm gonna be like, "Look, I need to fucking move to right next to this thing." I think
Yeah.
I will. I really will this next time just to secure my position because I'm just not
Yeah.
fucking around with this anymore, man. Uh,
And this is something I used to tell my students, because I was an ESL teacher, right? And like I would be part of the administration of an exam and I would be going around to different rooms to ensure that those students were receiving the appropriate accommodations that they were guaranteed by the state, right? If they were
yeah.
taking a math test or whatever, they might have the option to take it in their language, or they could listen to it two times over, or they could listen to it an infinite number of times, depending on whatever their particular learning plan called for, right? In the case of, I'm sure you've worked with audio too, right? If you're going to deliver audio to a room, let's say you're setting up a concert, you're not going to put all of the speakers on one side of the stage. It's
Yeah.
just asinine, right? They should be center, and they should be, if it's stereo sound, that sound needs to be in the center line to reach both sides.
At
So
least
like it
front
needs to be
center.
front and center, and it should be a certain height, right? A little above the ears of the listeners. It's so that it's reaching people behind them as well.
Right.
It's just there's always going to be these issues, and like yeah, you have to be the nail that sticks out because you're not going to get hammered
Right.
down in these situations.
I'm not gonna get hammered down a fifth time.
Yeah,
That's for sure. This will be my
yeah.
fifth
But
time
this,
taking it. I need to sign up for it actually.
I wish that these things would go computer based because that would take care of a lot of these accommodations. But you know, uh,
It's
you never
Japanese,
know how
man.
long it takes for them to get around to these things. Yeah,
It's
yeah.
Japanese. They take a while to update.
The TOEFL went computer based, I think, in like 2006, something like that.
Does the
So,
TOEFL as a test seem like an English JLPT? It's like kind of the same deal.
uh, no, it's not quite because the TOEFL is primarily for schools. It's
Mm.
primarily for people looking to study at universities in English. So the material is very much geared towards that. Like you'll get like a little science reading about uh, what do you call it?
Chlorophyll.
Chrysalis metamorphosis or something like that. Yeah, and the water cycle. Like that was a favorite topic. But yeah, you'll usually get stuff that's geared towards sort of the general um, liberal arts education kind of idea. A little bit of something about art, a little bit of something about science. because that's the kind of language that you're going to encounter in a college setting.
Okay.
And then, but one thing, and this is very interesting. I would generally not consider a language test to be valid unless it had language production. The JLPT does not actually have language production. That means there's no speaking and there's no writing.
Yeah.
Those things are hard. Those things are hard. If you're administering a test globally to, I don't know how many people they give this test to, but that means you're going to need people to read all those essays and short answers. You're going to need people to listen to all of the things that a person says. And like, I think that's great. That's what's going to give you the real validity of a test. That's what's going to tell you if a student is actually capable, but they just can't logistically do it very easily.
Yeah.
It's not a for-profit company, right? This is run through the government. So,
Yeah. Hence that passport ease if you pass.
yeah. But they what they do is they try to address language production in the vocabulary grammar section, where it's kind of like they call them close activities, where you fill in the blank. It's like, oh well, if you
Yeah.
know this,
Yeah.
then maybe you could write a sentence. So it's not ideal, but I think it's probably the best they could do in a multiple choice format.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I feel like there needs to be something in conjunction with the JLPT, or perhaps an alternative to the JLPT that really does these other things. Because like the TOEFL has speaking, they have writing, so
Yeah,
they've always just done it.
no speaking in JLPT. It's weird, but
No,
that's how it is.
no. So yeah, it's not a perfect test. No test is. There's the same general strategies for all standardized tests and language tests really apply here. Um, I think the major issue that I have otherwise is that it's only offered once a year for most people outside of Japan.
I'd love
And
for it to be offered in the summer as well. Just like if I failed,
yeah,
I could just take it again quickly. I would just keep
yeah. The
taking it till
last
I
time
passed.
I took it in 2019, and I thought like, hey, that's cool. I'm on the boards for N2. I'll see what I can do in 2020, and now it's 2023, and I the nearest place that has the test now is about 200 miles away.
Whoa.
Um,
Where?
if I want to drive there, it's like 2 tanks of gas. I have to get a hotel, and
Where is it? Can you say?
the nearest test to me is in Ann Arbor, Michigan, at the University of Michigan. Yeah,
Oh, man. Well, if you know what?
and the
If
thing
you
is,
really
it,
feel like you can pass, like you're gonna
right?
murder
So
that
that's the
test,
thing.
you might as well just drive out and take it.
Look at this. This test used to be like $65, I think, and now it went up to 100. So the fee has increased quite a bit. Really, that's a big jump. Um, It's about 200 miles away, so I'm looking at 2 tanks of gas, basically. I'm going to have to refill. So let's just say $50 in gas. Okay. And then I have to get a
Hotel.
hotel. So at best, I'd say I could like get $100 for the night, right? Because I can't do that trip of 3 to 4 hours on the same day I'm taking the test and come home.
No, not
It's
at
not
all.
going to work.
Not at all.
And the other thing is, it's only offered once a year, and it's offered in December, which could be snow, and that could be a problem. So like I might pay for my test for $100. I might pay for a hotel for $100, and then I might find these conditions are not really good for driving. I'm going to have to pass on the test. So
That
I'm
sucks,
really
man.
stuck. So it's just like, well, if you're going to offer it once a year, please offer it in the summer. it's,
I
it's
know,
the
right?
weather is better.
That
I mean,
would
we could
make
still
a
get
lot of sense.
thunderstorms and stuff, but like, you know, I'm safer in the summer than I am in the well, it's not technically winter, December 2nd, but it's approaching it.
Well, close
So
enough.
yeah.
Any time in December, I would personally consider winter.
Yeah. I mean, it's we know the solstice is the mark of winter, but like the weather usually comes in a little ahead of that.
Mhm.
So, you know,
That's right.
so yeah, there's some issues there. uh, you know, in terms of though, like preparing for the test, if anybody's interested in taking it, I have looked at some resources. And again, like I said, I'm not a Japanese language expert, but I have a great deal of experience working with educational materials. So I would say some of the best resources you can find out there are the Nihongo no Mori, which actually, Andrew, you put me onto that early on. I like their
Very good.
materials. I think they do a
Extremely
really good
good.
job.
They have a good
And
app.
they,
They have a good,
mhm.
YouTube channel that's divided up by the numbers, and, the teacher's cute. So, yeah, there's that.
Well,
Sorry to add that in, but
they've got, I mean, they might have new teachers now. So like it's always
that's
changing.
true. It's changing,
But
yeah.
they've got like a full course now you could sign up for. They've got the app is robust, and they also have a book, and the book is affordable. You can buy it on Amazon.com, meaning the US Amazon. It's like 25 bucks, and it covers all of the different so-called modalities of language. It's got a vocabulary section, a grammar section, reading and listening, whereas most books separate it for each one. And this book is only like 25 bucks. That's the Nihongo no Mori, um, like Kono Isatsu de something Gokaku Suru. It's just one big book, and you pick the level you want to take, and it's all inclusive. It's very nice because if you're only looking to spend so much and have access to all the materials you need, it's there. It's
Mhm.
nice. Um, if you're if you do want to like focus on different areas, I like the Shinkansen Master series is nice,
That's what
and the
I
Soul
had,
Matome.
but I feel like they didn't update.
Mm.
Have they had a book recently? They were
I'm
really
not sure
great,
when they
like
last
10,
updated.
not to, knock your list as you're saying it, but
Hmm.
I mean, yeah, I thought it was an excellent study book, like the best
Hmm.
JLPT book you could get, but I feel like they haven't updated in 10 years or more.
So for me, the thing about Shinkansen Master is I feel like it's a very good resource. It's got a lot of materials to go through. I feel like their explanations are pretty good, but on anything that gets a little bit hazy, a little gray area, I feel like you're best off using Shinkansen Master with a teacher. I would
Yeah.
not I would not say that that's like the best for independent study. I do think you will need the insight of an educator here and there with that. I think that the Nihongo no Mori gives you a lot of options to work on your own, which is pretty nice. And then I also mentioned I think it's Nihongo So Matome.
Mhm.
That's another series. That one is great if you have limited time and you just want to do a little bit each day. The So Matome series is just so perfectly paced for that. It's really nice. It's not as in depth, not as heavy as the Shinkansen, but like it's very good. And the material that you will use is better than the material that you won't use. So always the
Right.
case.
I've used those as well. Those are good.
You know. And lastly, as someone who just constantly wants to promote reading, to say like that's the big thing. I mean, this is all about. This is really me. Like, I did Japanese study. I got back into it because I really needed to have empathy for my students when I was teaching English as a second language, right? But it's also because I need to really understand the modalities of language, how they function from the perspective of a student. And the way I am a student of Japanese is because I want to play video games in Japanese. That's really the primary goal. I have like nothing else I really need. There's not a lot of people to talk to around me, unfortunately. There's there's some folks. There's
Yeah.
but like it's really just like I love games and it's really fun and it keeps me sharp. So I recommend if you're not going to play games. There's also something called Satori Reader. Uh,
Okay.
this this thing, it's like working with a teacher through reading. The stories are not always what I would consider to be of high interest, but high interest is subjective. They have a lot of different passages, and let's say a story might take like 70 pages, but they're not really like full novel pages. And in each page or chapter, there's highlighted vocabulary words. There are things you can highlight for phrases to examine the grammar. And the English explanation of it is really very much written as if a teacher were there explaining it to you. It's a great self study resource. It really is. It's expensive. You got to pay a subscription for like a monthly fee or a yearly fee or whatever, and they go on sale every now and then. But it's excellent. It's the best I've ever seen of that type of thing, and I feel like I haven't seen enough in that arena, honestly.
Okay, that's cool. This is great stuff, man. There's one called
Mm.
Language Learning with Netflix, which is a browser extension. I guess you'd have to watch Netflix
Mm.
on your computer, but you turn on like a foreign show, whatever language you're learning, and then it's like a combination of that Likai-chan, Likai-kun, like the
Mm-hmm.
you
Yep.
mouse over a word. It's like that with the subtitles, and it's like I don't know. It's a learning thing that you can do while watching your favorite Netflix shows. So that's another one
Yeah,
that
that's
could be
cool.
that could be fun. So um, did you? Those were all the ones in your list. Did you have more?
Yeah. So just to clarify further with Netflix, it is a really good resource if you're into the shows from Japan. Like I think there weren't that many shows I was really into, but if you look for a show with Netflix originals, those tend to have good subtitles for all languages. So you
Yeah.
could potentially watch it with your native language subtitles and then switch it over to Japanese, or you could leave it with no subtitles and then watch it again with subtitles in Japanese. It's really nice. I only dropped it because it got really expensive. Netflix kept jacking up the prices, but like, yeah,
Yeah.
it's a fantastic resource. It really is.
I
Because if
turned
you just
on
like
the
watching
cheap
stuff, it's great.
I watched the cheap plan with the commercials.
Mm,
That's the
yeah, I can't.
it's like half the price. Plus, Netflix has sort of become the one we watch the least.
Mm,
YouTube is what we watch the most, honestly, dude. I mean, it's just got the most stuff. It's hard to compete
yeah,
with that with all the user generated stuff
yeah.
there, power to the people and
That's
whatnot.
that's what I watch the most too. Honestly, I'm always watching some random video game thing. It really is the
Oh
case.
man, Happy Console Gamer, Metal Jesus, John Riggs, whoever,
Yeah.
Top Hat Gaming Man, all those guys. Yeah, like love them, man. Yeah,
Always,
those are.
always watching something on YouTube.
Yeah, it took me a while to get into it. I was like, "Oh, this is like the new TV." Like, that's the thing with me being an elder millennial, and you're this way. Or at least you're the youngest Gen X.
Young Gen X.
That's
Yeah.
absolutely possible. You're really on the cusp. But
Yeah.
like, I'm like young enough to get into it, but I'm old enough to be really slow to get into it. I just that's just how it's been for me. But anything else about the test?
Yeah. So the one last thing I'd like to address is that I feel like it's kind of disappointing that not enough things have the level in mind. Now let me clarify that a little bit. When you deal with texts, right, in English language education, there's basically reading levels. And so you might, if you're teaching a third grade class, you're going to have a list of books that are at what's considered an appropriate third grade reading level. And you don't get enough of that when it comes to popular media, right? Like, I don't know that we have Lexile is a brand name, but that's one of like the companies that does a reading level. I don't know that we have a Lexile level or reading level set for, say, Avengers Endgame. Like if I were a student who said, "Oh, I would like to study English with this movie," I don't know that I can say like, "Hey, this is the level it's going to be at, and this is what you should consider going into it, and this is kind of the vocabulary you need." And I feel like the JLPT, I don't really know what it's leveled against so well. And I think that like with the TOEFL, I know it's pretty clearly designed for people looking at colleges. but the JLPT is a little broader because it's used for employment as well. And
Yeah.
yeah, I don't really know. Like, I want to play a Japanese game. I, the kanji are kind of all over the place. Like, yeah, with Chrono Trigger, I would see a word and be like, I can't figure this word out. And then I'd see the kanji and be like, oh my God. I would have known that if they had given me the kanji, actually. But like,
They
it's reading levels are a little unclear. And
there
I
was
wish that we could get something more strongly aligned with that in the language study for Japanese and for the JLPT, so that it could all be kind of like we have something we can clearly target. But
there was one
that's a
word
wish list.
in one of the Metroid games I played where
Mm-hmm.
it was this. I've never seen it ever again. I only seen it once in my life, but it was, I forget the reading, but it meant to die at sea. Very specific, but they were using this, to die in space, obviously, but it was kind of poetic
Mm-hmm.
wording, right?
Yeah.
Because it was Metroid. But um, other than that, it was pretty much, you know, up on my level, I guess, or a little below actually, which was cool.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it would be very cool if they had that. I think they need like a new board to do that or something.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah, it
know.
kind of requires some government oversight with a lot of educators, to say like, hey, this is kind of the word list we kind of expect to be standard for a fifth grader. Like, they're going to be familiar with this because it's happening, right? Like, they're making decisions in Japanese media about when they are going to provide furigana or when they're just going to write it out in and hiragana and stuff for younger kids. So, like, I think it would be good to formalize that and have some alignment with the JLPT. But
It'd be cool if YouTubers could at least also, like, on their own, add their own rating, you know, uh,
hmm
or maybe the AI and the algorithm will do that on its own eventually. That'd be kinda interesting. Honestly, this might be a job for AI eventually. That'd be kind of cool. But,
take a lot of very careful and talented teachers before the AI could learn anything from them.
I guess so, yeah. I guess I didn't think it was too bad because those jobs don't exist. It's not taking away any jobs because the job doesn't exist at all. But yeah, I know what you're saying. I don't know.
I
I
mean,
don't know.
the AI can't do anything that people can't already do, right? So,
You
like,
have to
you would,
teach it, yeah.
if we're not even at the point where we have human beings doing this, we're pretty far out from having computers do it. But the
That's
computers
true.
could sure as hell speed up this process.
Yeah, speed it up, kinda get it out there. Because I mean, there's one channel called Tokai On Air. I don't know what they're
Mhm.
saying half the time, man, and they're not like, they don't have, like, crazy accents. It's just I think that they just really it's just how they speak, man. They're just speaking some real shit. And,
Hmm.
like, there's other channels like Dekakin, Hikakin, uh, even Eiga Channel,
I don't know these. I've never seen them.
like, I can understand most of what they're saying, but then cut
Hmm.
to Tokai on Air. I don't know what's going on, dude, half the time. I don't know what it is, man,
So it's tough for a
yeah.
language learner out there, regardless of the language.
It's easier than
It's
ever,
really,
though. But it could be
yeah,
easier is
for
what you're
sure.
saying. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's up to us educators to really sort of try and narrow things down and say like, hey, we're going to make these levels, and people will always push back, but like I said with the prescriptivist grammar, like, nothing is ever going to be solid. It's not going to last forever. It's kind of silly, but like, I think it's worth it to establish something to have something to work from.
That'd be cool. It'd help out us learners. Is that pretty much it?
Yeah, yeah. So anybody taking the JLPT, I hope we were able to help you in some way. We wish you good luck. Absolutely. And especially you, Andrew.
Thank
It's time for you to get that certificate.
Yes, well, especially all of our listeners, let's put it that way. But yeah, I'm going to pass. So thanks everybody. Also, before we go, I do want to say, like, learning Japanese, well, playing video games did kick in my love of all things Japan and wanting to learn the language. And again, going back to season one and my childhood, and yours too, to a certain extent, like the EGM would often bring up Famitsu and, the whole Japanese gaming thing and Japanese gaming, Japanese culture, would pop up even in the 90s quite a bit in EGM in the magazines. And so you couple that with getting into Ghibli movies and anime in general, that was really the beginning of my wanting to learn the Japanese language.
Yeah.
And, uh, you know, them bringing up Famitsu, I wanted to read Famitsu. That was another thing, Famitsu Weekly. Now I have a
Yeah.
couple older copies here too, and I've read a couple, and it's been great. So it's been a lot, kind of a bucket list item that I accomplished. I didn't read it cover to cover, but I didn't read EGM cover to cover either. It was a magazine
Yeah.
thing,
Right.
So, but I did, read it enough to my enjoyment, and yeah, you know, I love it, and I love this. I love the cross section of video games and Japanese. It's
Mhm.
well, we're so used to it now, but there's still something almost unlikely about it. But I love even that. I don't know what it is. So
Yeah.
that's gonna do it, right, for this episode.
Yeah. Yeah. I think so.
Okay, everybody, thanks for joining us for another episode in season two. I think we're honestly, dude, we did a great job with season one, but I'm loving season two already. We're still making it as of this recording, but I think it's great.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm with you there.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Let us know if you have any suggestions for future episodes in the comments, or anything, your JLPT experiences or whatever. Let us know, and that's it. We'll see you later.
Thank you.